Hey, what's up, everybody? William Warfield here with you. And man, we got a great show lined up here tonight. Can't wait to get it started. I've actually got Pat and Gary standing by, and we're going to go ahead and get things started right now, as a matter of fact. So I'm going to bring these guys on into the show. And there we go. Hey, guys, how you doing?
Good afternoon. I'm doing great.
Doing great, William and Pat Day. Boy, we're just so excited about having Pat on the show. Thank you for doing the podcast, Pat. We really appreciate you.
Oh, you're very welcome. How do I get this thing to go full? I don't have you on there, Gary. How do I get
You know,
that?
Oh, he's got
William,
the Yeah, there's a chat window on the side, so that if you look on the screen down at the bottom, there's a little monitor icon, and you can tap that and it'll turn that chat screen off for you.
Uh, nope. I didn't. Oh, here. Wait a minute. There we go.
There you go. All right.
there
Yeah. Uh
Oop,
oh. Oh, you hit
there-
there you.
yeah,
ah,
and I found too, Pat. You can't move a whole lot, or it messes up the streaming for some reason, right, William?
Yeah, if you move it, it takes more bandwidth coming in, so that's usually the
Yeah,
case.
I'll try to sit
yeah.
still.
That's what I think, Pat. It's hard to do, isn't it? Hey, Pat, I got to ask you, how did you get started being a riding horses and being such a great Kentucky Derby and just so many races. I mean, we go through your bio, but you won just about everything possible.
Well, I'll be honest with you, Gary. I believe my steps were divinely directed. I believe I was born to be a jockey. I was tailor made to be a jockey. I was raised in the mountains of Colorado where there was no horse racing. So I was naturally drawn to rodeos. I participated in rodeos early on in my life, junior high, high school. Right out of high school, I was going to rodeos trying to be a bull rider and having a very limited amount of success. But met people that suggested because of my stature that my size, maybe I should be a jockey. A guy gave me his name and number and said, if you ever have an interest, give me a call. And in the fall of 1972, I did, and he got me a job on a thoroughbred farm in California. I went out there in January and met with the farm owner, the farm manager. Farrell Jones was the owner. A guy named Gene Cummings was a farm manager, and they said, "You want to be a jockey?" I said, "Yep, want to be a jockey." Well, he said, "This is what we think you should do. You should be on this farm for 2 to 3 years, learn the business from the ground up." Absolute correct way to go. But I'd never been to the races. I'd never seen a race. I had no idea what I was trying to become. And they said at the end of 2 to 3 years, depending on how quickly you catch on, we'll send you to the racetrack. You'll go to work for a trainer. You'll watch races, study the films, experience the racetrack life, continuing to hone your skills. You do that for another year, you'll be ready to start riding. Well, at the end of a month, I said, I'm not going to do this for 2 or 3 years, not knowing what I was trying to become. And I left there and had no intention to continue to pursue a career. But um, I believe today that God had other plans. And subsequently, a couple of months later, through a sequence of events, I wound up on a racetrack in Arizona, met and became very friendly with a man named Carl Pugh, a professional cowboy, a team roper, who had just recently started training racehorses. Became very dear friends with him, started galloping his horses. And by midsummer, I told Carl, I said, I want to start riding. I was excited and yeah, I just wanted to get in the fray. And he said, well, I'll take your contract. At that time, you had to have a contract holder and in order to be an apprentice, in order to start riding. And I'll let you ride some of my horses. And I said, excellent. And so I started. The first horse I rode for him ran second, just got beat. And it was a couple weeks later on July 29th, 1973, the last race of the day on a horse of his called Four Blunged. Got up in the shadow of the wire and broke my maiden, won my first race. And the rest of they say is history. I mean, it was pretty obvious to knowledgeable horse people that I was tremendously gifted. A lot of natural talent. Just a natural.
Pat, you had 8,803 career victories. You mentioned your first one there, but just an outstanding career. You're a winner of 9 Triple Crown races, including the Kentucky Derby. You were inducted to the Hall of Fame in 1991. Talk to us about your historic career.
Well, it's just been, as I said, I feel that I was tremendously blessed with talent and ability and opportunities to showcase that talent. That was due in no small part to the wonderful representation that I had through the course of my career. I had wonderful agents that done a great job of getting me on live mounts, as we would call them, horses that stood a chance, and not just stood a chance, but oftentimes was the best horse in the race. As I said, I started there in Arizona, made my way to Chicago, and was way back east in the summer of '74 to Rockingham Park. Went back to Chicago, down to New Orleans, and in 1976, made my way to New York. Was in New York for a couple of years and had a fair amount of success, but mentally wasn't really ready for the big time. Came back to the Midwest to kind of regroup. Met a wonderful woman from Louisiana, Sheila. We got married in '79, and I've been married going on 41 years. Real stabilizing factor in my life. And then we were continuing to have a fair amount of success in the Midwest. In 1982, I was in a position to be leading rider in North America. Subsequently won that coveted title. Head-to-head battle with Angel Cordero. Last day of the year, I was riding in New Orleans. He was riding in New York. And at the end of the racing program, we were tied up, 395 winners on the year. And the only racetrack running on New Year's Eve was a little racetrack called Delta Downs. And because of the close proximity to New Orleans, I was able to charter a plane, fly down there, rode a couple of races. Some riders gave up their mounts for me and rode a horse called Dana's Woof Woof that won and secured the national riding for me. Then I went on. Then I won the riding title again in '83. In January of 1984, I had an encounter with Jesus Christ in the hotel room in Miami that really turned my career around, turned my life around. When I invited Christ into my life, he set me free from a lifestyle of drugs and alcohol and sordid living, and helped me get focused, helped me to recognize that I'd truly been blessed with talent, ability, opportunities, and I got focused and became appreciative of those opportunities. Immediately after that, I thought I was being called into the ministry. And it was then that I met the chaplain, Mike Spencer, at racetrack at Oaklawn Park. I shared with him my dilemma, and he said, well, let's pray about it. We did, and through that process, the Lord revealed to me that he had saved me to work within racing, not to leave it. Take the talent, take the ability, do the best that I could, all the while looking for opportunities to give him the praise, the honor, and the glory. At that moment, I immediately thought of the Kentucky Derby. I'm going to win the Derby. I got to be ready. Well, I didn't win the Kentucky Derby, but later that year, they started a series of races called the Breeders' Cup. And I was incredibly fortunate, secured the mount on a horse called Wild Again. And again, I believe it was divinely orchestrated. When the entries came out, there was no rider named on Wild Again. Eddie Maple was supposed to have ridden him. But he was also supposed to ride a horse for Leroy Jolly. If Leroy would have ran his horse in the sprint, Eddie was going to ride Wild Again in the Classic. As it turned out, Leroy ran his colt in the Classic, and Wild Again was open. I had ridden him earlier in the year, and so I went seeking Mr. Timpany, the trainer. He was seeking my services. I was seeking the opportunity, and we collaborated. And Wild Again run the race of his life, and won that $3 million race. That really catapulted my career to the next level. And after that, and again, I go back to January 27th of '84 when I invited Christ into my life and really got my career back on track. And then won the Breeders' Cup, won the riding title for the third time. really catapulted my career to the next level. And then opportunities started becoming available to not just to ride in races, but to ride good horses in major races all over the country.
Yeah, that's the key to have those good mounts, isn't it, Pat? You know, it's one thing to be a great jockey. You know that. I think you're friends with Steve Cawthon, a Kentucky kid who, early on in his career, he's 18 years old. He wins a Triple Crown. So you thinking, Steve had to be thinking too. You know what? This is going to be easy. And then I don't think he ever won another Triple Crown after that, did he?
No, as a matter of fact, it was a short time after that, I believe, that he made his way to England and started riding
Yeah.
across the pond there, and had a great amount of success in Europe. And he was unflappable. I just admire Steve so much. I was in New York when he first came in there, and for a young man his age, to have the success that he did in every day. The camera was in his face. The media was all over him, and he was the same day in and day out. It never altered him even a little bit. Wins the Triple Crown, doesn't phase him. I mean, he was the same Steve, uh, you know, before as he was after winning all those races. And just to conduct yourself in such exemplary fashion with that amount of success is really tremendous. I mean, it's just remarkable.
I want to tell some folks out here what your big races is that you've won here, Pat, and that's the Kentucky Derby, obviously in 1992. You won the Preakness in 1985, 1990, 94, 95, and 96, and then the Belmont Stakes in 89, 94, and 2000. But I think a lot of folks were wanting to know, because 1989 was a special year where you had two really good horses, amazing horses. When you talk about Easy Goer and Sunday Silence, can you recount the 1989 Triple Crown? And what if those two horses wasn't going in the same year together? Well, can you only imagine? I mean, you might have had a Triple Crown winner that year, possibly, right?
Oh, absolutely. Two great horses, very competitive, very well conditioned by Charlie Whittingham and Shug McGahee. A great East Coast West Coast rivalry that came together here at on the first Saturday in May in the Derby. Wound up with a racetrack that Easy Goer just would not get over. He'd gotten beat here in the fall before the 2-year-old championship. Got beat by a horse that he'd beaten several times previously, and just wouldn't extend himself over the track, and came up the same way in the Derby. Sunday Silence, of course, ran brilliant and got the run for the roses. We hooked up again 2 weeks later in the Preakness, and I'll be honest with you, I didn't ride the best race in my career. And came up just a nose short. I think that I was on the best horse that day. Although the end result was that we got beat a nose. Um, Easy Goer was wanting to run. I'd eased up alongside of Sunday Silence when we turned up the backside, and P-Val, good friend of mine and a good race rider, he looked over and seen who it was, and he decided we needed to get a little closer to the outside fence. He started floating me out. Easy Goer wanted to run, and I said, nah, I think we're going to hold our ground. And so I let him run on, and then Sunday Silence, P-Val let his horse run on. And I don't know how fast we went from the 3/4 pole to half-mile pole, but we were getting it. I finally got a little bit of a jump on Sunday Silence and kind of eased him back down in behind Houston. And at which point Pat had to check on Sunday Silence. My momentum carried me on up to and past Houston, who had been on the lead at that point. And I knew that Sunday Silence would come back at me. What I didn't know was that he would recuperate so quickly. And in a short amount of time, boom, he was right back on me. Now he's on the outside pushing me down, and in a little tight around the turn into the stretch. Easy Goer was real hesitant about changing leads. He'd never been in that tight of quarters before, and so finally, coming to the 8th pole, he changed back to his right lead, and when he did, he surged ahead of Sunday Silence just a bit, and I thought, okay, we'll just go on from here and pull away from him a little bit. And about that time, Easy Gore just ran out of gas. I mean, he was done. His legs just went limp. He was still fighting hard, but just limber legged. And at that point, I said, well, I'm gonna try to initiate a little something here. And I knew that Sunday Silence and Pat had been laying on me pretty good, so I thought if I turned my horse's head out, maybe he would come out just a little bit, brush with Sunday Silence as long as we had the advantage, and maintain that to the finish line. I turned his head out, but he was so tired at that point. His head turned out, his body didn't follow him, and we come down to the wire, and Sunday Silence beat us by just a narrowest of margins. And then we come back 3 weeks later into Belmont, and really gave it to him. They said the mile and he was a genuine 1.5 mile horse, and wide sweeping turns and all of that. But I don't think it was that as much as he was just really on top of his game. Of course, it was his home track, but I believe at the end of the day he was the better of the two, though the record doesn't bear that out.
Well, Pat, you're the all-time winningest jockey at Churchill Downs. You've had great success at Keeneland. What would you say is, I know we've got friends that love Keeneland, Bob and Wendy Cramp, just go to Keeneland all the time. They love it out there. Which track, I'm not going to ask you to tell us which one you prefer, because that's not fair to you, but I know you love racing at both tracks, Keeneland and at Churchill.
Oh, I love Kentucky racing, bottom line. And Keeneland was always like a working vacation. It's so pretty over there. And it's just every racetrack has their own flavor. They have their own, I don't know what the word would be, but each track is a little bit different. Just the atmosphere and the ambiance and
The ambiance.
is that a good word? Does that work?
I'm using it, so.
The background noise, the noise around, he's out there in the moment.
Well, but Keeneland was just the kind of place. The first time I went there, it had to be in 1980, maybe. It was the first time. Everybody came to the races all dressed up. I mean, it was a Sunday go-to meeting. It was a social event. It was a place to see and be seen. And
it was like
and it was just yeah. Just and it was just a wonderful place to race. Just a wonderful crowd and just an ideal setting. Which just really added to that. And of course, Churchill Downs with the Kentucky Derby and all the history. Another great facility and great fun riding at both of those racetracks.
It's been often said that that Keeneland was Pat Day's playground. What do you think about that?
Well, we were incredibly fortunate at Churchill Downs and Keeneland, and the key to my success was simply capital STOCK, stock. I told my agents, I said, put me on horses that are 10 lengths the best. I'll win by a length and look good doing it. And they done that to a large degree. I had great representation throughout my career. The agent is indispensable. They're responsible for getting you on the horses that you ride, making the connections, and it's their job to get you on the best horse possible. You can't drive a Volkswagen in a Cadillac race and win very often. Most of the times the Cadillac is going to win, and I was fortunate enough that they got me on Cadillacs for the most part.
Speaking of that, Pat, at one day, you had 9 mounts. You won 8 of those. How does any jockey win 8? Almost all upset that you didn't win the 9th race, the 9 of 9. Were you upset with that?
Yeah, I was. It was one of those days we came in. It was September 13th, I believe, at Arlington Park. It was a muddy, miserable day, really. And days like that, when you come back from the track, after the race, you don't have but just a few moments to clean up and get ready for the next race. And we just got on a roll. Horses were running, things were clicking. Of course, there again, stock. And the one horse that got beat, he ran second, got beat ahead, and my dear friend Lynn Whiting trained the winner. I rode a horse for J.R. Smith. We got beat ahead. I could have very well been on the other horse. You know what I mean? Coulda, woulda, shoulda. But no, that was a remarkable day. Just it didn't. I didn't have a chance to really enjoy it until after the fact. I mean, it was just going and going and going. And but what an awesome day! Again, just defer to my agent and the stock that he was getting me on. The guy that was working for me at that time was a fellow named Fred Amy, just doing an excellent job. There was a man named Jim Reed that worked for me basically for the most of my first 10 years. And then Fred worked for me for 10 years. And then Doc Danner, Larry Danner worked for me the last 10 years. And then my hat's off to those three men. They again, you can only do what the stock will allow you to do.
Got some questions coming in. Anthony Cook sent in a question. He said, "Ask Pat about winning the Kentucky Derby, and wants to know, is that the hardest race possible to win?"
Well, the Kentucky Derby that's the race that everybody wants to win. Everybody involved with horse racing, at least in North America, they want to win. The United States, they want to win the Kentucky Derby. That is the race that is synonymous with North American horse racing. And, you travel around, people come to find out that you're involved in horse racing. Inevitably, the very first question, did you ever win the Derby? Did you ever win the Derby? I mean, they don't know which end of the horse to hang the bridle on, but they've heard of the Kentucky Derby. And,
right.
So I think that in and of itself makes it difficult. It's such an elusive goal. It's one race a year, a chance of a lifetime. I was 9 times before I was fortunate enough to get the mount on Lily T, and he came through for us, and what a joy to win that race for trainer Lynn Whiting, Mr. Cal Partee. But just what a great race.
It was. And Pat, that brings up the Derby would be next Saturday. You've worked the Derby. Of course, you've been a rider many times, but you've also worked the Derby with NBC Sports. I don't know. Was ESPN with ABC, were they doing the Derby the last year or so, or has that changed as far as who's covering the Derby?
I don't know that. I don't know for a fact who. I believe it's NBC. I believe they've got a long-term contract.
Yeah, okay.
With them, but no, I never done any cover with any network TVs. I've worked the Derby. There's an organization called Quint Events that gets a block of tickets, and they call it the Derby Experience. That is, yeah. But I've never done any color or commentating on any of the TV coverage.
You're good at it. They'd be lucky to have you.
I would be happy to do that. I think it would be fun. Opportunity just hasn't been made available. I haven't sought after it. But it would be great fun.
How does not having the Derby next week, how does that change everything for owners, for horses, for riders? I mean, it's going to be in September. It's going to be 4 or 5 months later, so they'll be older, horses. They'll still be 3-year-olds. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm. Well, this coronavirus, COVID-19 it's just changed up everything for everybody. And certainly the people in horse racing, there's horses still, they have to be fed and cared for and trained in hopes that one day we'll be able to return to racing. I know that they're looking at running the Derby in September, and we're all hopeful, optimistic that by that time things will have leveled off and we can do it. But right now, I don't think anybody would, I don't know what the odds makers are saying. What's the odds of running the Derby in September right now? I don't know. But it's certainly changed up everything. The owners aren't able to make any money. The trainers, nobody, because you can't run. But yet the horses need to be fed and cared for and trained. Jockeys they can't there's no place to participate. So everybody's furloughed to a degree. And jockeys, if we don't ride, we don't make any money. We don't have any, high dollar contract that is going to continue to pay us if we're not playing. If we're not participating, we don't get paid. So there's a whole lot of people. You think of not just the jockeys, but the people working directly with the horses. The trainers obviously are still involved. The exercise riders, The grooms are taking care of the horses. But beyond that, everybody's out of work. The jockeys are out of work, the valets are out of work, the gate crew's out of work, ticket sellers are out of work, everybody, concessions. I mean, everybody in the game, everybody with the exception of those directly involved with the horses, are sitting on the sidelines, anxious to get back to work. And what this means for September, I'm hoping that all of this is behind us. And I'm hoping that the oddity, it's, who would have ever guessed that we'd ever run the Derby in September? But the novelty of that, I'm hoping will spur an interest that is unlike any other Derby. I remember when they first night that they ran under the lights, they'd put up lights at Churchill, and they were going to have the Twin Spires under lights or something. I don't remember just what they called the evening. But my wife and I said, I was not riding. I'd already retired. But I said, I want to go out and see what this is like. I mean, historic Churchill Downs running it in the dark, under lights. And so we went out there, and people were walking down Central Avenue, going to the track, and you'd have thought it was Derby Day. I mean, it was tremendous enthusiasm and energy. And I'm hoping that it will be something comparable to for the Derby in September, believing that we get to run it.
Yeah. Do you believe that there's a possibility, if we're not all back to normal by then, do you believe that there's a possibility that they may run it without fans and just depend on like the betting and the TV contracts to kind of pay for what's going on?
I really don't know, William. I don't. I know that everybody's hoping that we can have fans in the stands. Yeah. That the social distancing will kind of be lightened up just a touch, and some semblance of normalcy. But who knows? Who knows with the way this thing is going?
Mm-hmm. You talked earlier about the ambience, the sound around you as you're, around in the racetrack or, getting ready to take off or whatever, but what's it like on the backstretch of a normal race, and then what's it like on a big race, like something like the Kentucky Derby or the Preakness or something like that?
Oh, there's just no comparison, and I couldn't imagine, running the Derby without any fans in the stands is I can't even imagine what that would be like, because it's the fans that really make the day, make the race. It's all the excitement, enthusiasm, energy that they bring to the Downs on Derby Day that just makes it so special. Obviously in the summertime, midweek, there's a spattering of people out there, and Churchill Downs is such a massive facility that when you don't have a huge crowd, they get lost up there. And so we like to play in front of a full house. We, meaning I'm talking about the participants in the great sport of horse racing. We like it when there's a lot of people in the stands because of the energy and enthusiasm that they bring to it. So it's I couldn't imagine running the Derby without fans. What that would be like for the participants, it would be it would still be the Derby, but the fans they really make it. Somebody asked me one time, they said, what sets the Derby apart? And I said, well, very simply, the Louisville, Kentucky, Southern Indiana area. It's the people. 2 weeks out, we actually, they started planning for this immediately after the race was declared official last year. They start building up, and then with the Thunder over Louisville, boy, then they really get fired up. And for 2 weeks, it builds to a great crescendo, which is the Derby. And then immediately after the Derby, they start planning for next year. And it's all the people in the entire area that just, Louisville embraces it. Louisville is known as Derby Town. It's the people in the area that make it so special. It is the event in Churchill. I know we got great college football and sports teams, but Louisville is synonymous with the Derby. They're known for the Derby. When it is the event here, when you go to Maryland, it is one of several events, and when you go to New York, it's just an event. I'm sorry to say that, but it kind of gets. There's so much activity and so much going on. Even when there's a possible Triple Crown on the line, We don't always get a big crowd at the, you know, no, it's just not the same as the Derby. I'd said at the top of the program that every racetrack kind of has its own ambiance, and Derby Day is really the highlight of the ambiance at Churchill.
Pat, was Lily T. Would you say that that was the best horse that you rode at the Derby? Was there another horse that you want to talk about that might have even been better that maybe didn't win the Kentucky Derby?
Well, there was a number of years that I went into that race. I went into it every year believing that if you're in them, you can win them. Wild again
Yeah.
in the first classic showed me that if you're in them, you can win them. Oh, guy, the horse's name that won the Derby 50-1 that Giacomo that Mike Smith rode. The horse that Kelvin Burrell rode that was 50-1 come out of New Mexico. What was the horse's name? Forgive me, I'm pulling a blank, but they're proof in the pudding that if you're in them, you can win them. But certainly there were years when according to the professional handicappers, I had a decidedly better
Was
opportunity than I did with Little ET.
was it
You
Mine
know,
That
easy
Bird?
go. Mind
Mind
that
that
bird,
bird?
yes.
Yeah.
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 Yeah. William's the Google master.
Hey, don't give away the secret there now.
He can find anything. Hey, you just tell him, Pat, he can find it. Mind that bird. Yeah, that was Burrell, right?
Yeah, yeah. Calvin Burrell. But there was a number of times, Summer Squall, Easy Goer, Demons Be Gone. He was a favorite, bled in the race and had to be pulled up.
Oh,
I'm trying now. My mind just kind of went blank. But there were a number of times that I went into the race with horses that were a shorter price on the tote board for sure than Little ET was. But
yeah.
you know, I couldn't have been happier than to win it for trainer Lynn Whiting and Mr. Cal Partee, whom I'd had such significant success with for many years previous to that. And I knew it was very special to all of us, but especially to Mr. Partee. That was the one race he wanted to win. As with all of us, we want to be affiliated with the Kentucky Derby winner.
That's what a lot of people don't realize. It's a team. It's the owner. It's the trainer. Not only it's the rider. It's the guy that walks the horse. There's a lot of team involved in horse racing, and you want to. There's that you just went for. Am I right, Pat? I mean, there's just certain people that you just with and you love, and you want to win the race for them. You know.
Oh, absolutely, and it is a team event. You know, the rider and the trainer, they seem to get all the accolades and the pats on the back, but I've come to discover that we're only as strong as the weakest link. We're all like links in the chain, and we're only as strong as the weakest link. Everybody from the ground up, as you said, the groom, the hot walker, exercise personnel, the barn foreman or assistant trainer, the trainer that's calling the shots, you know, to the pony people that help to get you to the starting gate, the starting gate crew, the valets. I mean, there's any one of a number of people. If they don't do their job and do it right, you're not going to get the job done.
Those
And
people are
I
up at
would,
like they're up at like 5 in the morning because that horse doesn't have an alarm clock. It doesn't have a clock. When it's up, it wants to be up. So those riders and walkers are up there at 5 o'clock and 5:30 in the morning, walk around, running around Churchill and Keeneland. I mean, you got to really respect that, you know.
yeah, they're up early and it's 7 days a week. You know, them
Yep.
horses need to be fed, watered, and cared for 7 days a week, 365 days a year. And you know, I know that there's people that think that we're mistreating them and they're not taken care of. And I'll be honest with you, go out there and watch. Them horses are better cared for than the people caring for them to a large degree.
Got another question coming in here, and they want to know: are you involved with any backstretch outreach work? And then if they want to know how people can help support backstretch workers.
Yeah.
Well, I am. I've been very involved with and supportive of a ministry we have called the Racetrack Chaplaincy. Currently, I'm the president of the Kentucky Racetrack Chaplaincy. and we have a full-time chaplain, Joseph Del Rosario at Churchill Downs. Jessica Singleton she's over the women and children's ministries. We have a full-time chaplain that's working at Turfway Park and goes to Belterra in the summertime, Pavel Yarutzi. And then we have two chaplains, Ron and Jesus, that work at Ellis Park in the summertime. And we call ourselves a ministry of presence. They're out there walking the barns during training hours, meeting and greeting the folks and making themselves available. Of course, they're all licensed and able to do all of the facility, all of the activities of a minister or a preacher anywhere. They can marry and bury and counsel to a large degree. We have weekly church services. They have we've got a food pantry and an emergency food pantry and clothes closet to help meet some of the needs of the folks. But simply put, we try to meet some of the physical and some of the material needs, but most importantly, the spiritual needs of the people that make up the horse racing industry. And it's not just the people working directly with the horses, but the people on the front side. Everybody inside the enclosure of Churchill Downs is part of our congregation, if you would. And so, yeah, I'm very involved with that. At Churchill, of course, we've got the Backside Learning Center that has a variety of programs, and then they've got a Backside activities director that has programs to soccer matches and a variety of different things to take care of our people back there and give them an outlet. We're working hard to because a lot of our Backstretch personalities are personnel. They're away from home. It's a very transient group of people. They're like right now. They're stranded in New Orleans or Arkansas or Florida, waiting for the opportunity to come back here. Many of them left their wives and children here as they went to work. The women and children stayed here so the kids could go to school. Now this virus has really turned everything pretty much upside down. As far as how they could help, right off the top of my head, I couldn't tell you exactly what we can do. You could go to the website www.kentuckychaplaincy.org, I believe is the website. Look and see what we have going on there. Right now things are pretty quiet, but I've got a feeling the needs are going to go through the roof once we're able to open the doors.
Secretariat, obviously, a lot of people think that was the best. You're a world class jockey, so I'm not telling you don't know, but Secretariat, probably the best horse that there ever was. American Pharaoh, though, was pretty darn good, Pat. I mean, did that horse kind of save a horse racing? And I think it brought it back. I mean, everybody's paid more attention to it since American Pharaoh.
Well, I tell you what, we came close to having a Triple Crown winner several times between Secretariat and American, but by the time he came around, the longer the wait, the sweeter the taste, and it had been a long drive. So when the Triple Crown, when American Pharaoh won the Triple Crown, and of course he was a delightful horse.
Yeah.
And Bob Baffert made him readily available to the public. I mean, but he took it. Not every horse, especially a three-year-old colt, would have that demeanor. It was just very special. People could get up close to him, personal. Give him some carrots and rub him on the nose and all of that. I think kind of stimulated the interest.
Are you saying he was the Michael Jordan of horse racing? Or was Secretariat the Michael Jordan of horse racing? Are you saying he was like Michael of horse racing? Everybody loved him. He loved everybody. Or are you saying he was more like, or was Secretariat more like Michael Jordan? Everybody, they revered Secretariat. I mean, they just loved that horse.
Yeah, and Secretariat today is a household name. Everybody's heard of Secretariat. I don't know that the same can be said about American Pharaoh. he's got to go a ways to gain the popularity and notoriety that Secretariat has. But he certainly has his place in history, and certainly grateful for the shot in the arm that the racing industry received from and through his run there, winning the Grand Slam, the Triple Crown, and then the Breeders' Cup Classic, and that was pretty special.
He's kind
Pretty
of
special.
when I think horse racing, there's three names that come to mind. Man of War, Secretariat, and then of course American Pharoah. I just wonder how many other people think the same thing.
I think a Seabiscuit.
Yeah, that's another. Well, you're true. Of course, the movie helped out with that.
The movie was great,
Yeah.
Pat. I love that movie, Seabiscuit.
Yeah, it was a great show, but it's a great story.
Yeah.
And he was kind of he was a shot in the arm that this country needed it at a most pivotal time. He kind of brought the country together. I mean, that was before my time, but the movie and certainly what I've heard and read about him and the following that he garnered. The people standing room only when he would run and was on the lips of everybody.
Yeah. Got some more questions coming in here, Pat. If you don't mind, we got Jeremy wants to know, where do you travel to now, and what do you do in your retirement?
Well, recently I've not traveled at all, as anybody has with this coronavirus. But my wife has been in bad health since mid-July last year, and so I've been looking after her, and then my mother got ill last fall, and subsequently she passed away 2 days after Christmas. So I was spending a lot of time in Colorado with her and back and forth, and now my wife is getting back on her feet and doing well, I'm happy to say, and so when the coronavirus is over, hopefully we'll be able to get back on the road a bit. I do a lot of guest speaking. I'm not a motivational speaker. I like to go around and share with people the radical change that occurred in my life when I bent my knee and invited Christ into my heart, became born again on January 27th of 1984, and try to encourage them to taste and see that the Lord is good. It's just a joy to know and love and trust in the Lord, and the joy and the peace and contentment that I experience, the love of Christ poured out into my heart. I just have a desire to share that, and I've had to turn down a number of events beginning last fall with my wife not well, and then my mother falling ill, and now with the coronavirus, it's kind of put a halt to all of that. But hopefully we'll get back to doing some of that, and just my involvement with the racetrack ministry and the ministry at large.
Yeah. You've done a lot with Christ Chapel there. I think you helped start that the chapel there. You mentioned the chaplaincy that you're involved with there at Churchill Downs.
Well, the chaplaincy, the racetrack chaplaincy has been around for over 50 years. A man named Horace Roberts, Salty Roberts, was the one that really started that ministry 50 plus years ago. He was an exercise rider, worked in the valet parking lot he was working at Gulfstream in Hialeah in Florida, and then going to Monmouth Park in the summertime. And but found himself in the throes of alcoholism, was drinking a good bit. One evening, coming away from the racetrack, somebody gave him a religious tract, Christian tract, and just a little paper talking about the love of Christ and how to get saved. And he took it home, throwed it up on his dresser, went on about his business, came in a few nights later, really despondent, ready to take his own life. And somehow that piece of paper got in his hands. He read it, got convicted, recognized what he wanted and needed was Christ in his life, and at that moment invited Jesus into his heart. And immediately thereafter, he had a real burden on his heart for the people that he worked with, recognizing that the 7 days a week prohibited them from getting off the track and going to a church of their choice, and said, well, maybe we need to bring church to them. and he shared his burden and his vision with a fellow named Reverend L. Dawson. Reverend Dawson went with him to the racetrack in Florida and seen the need, seen the opportunity, and then went with him to the track owner, Mr. Doug Don, and shared with him what they'd like to do. Mr. Don said, "Well, you're welcome to use the old paint shop, clean it out, and use it if that's what you want to do." Was completely, in agreement and supportive. And so 50 plus years ago, they rolled in an upright piano, had the first church service, recognized church service on the backside of a racetrack. His vision, Salty's vision, was to have a chaplain at every racetrack in the world. And he traveled extensively in an effort to get that started. So the chaplaincy was here in Kentucky before I came here, before I came to Christ. And I got very involved with and supportive of the national organization, which currently has their offices in Lexington. But obviously, having my home here in Louisville, we became very involved with and supportive of our home track chaplaincy.
Yeah.
A number of years ago, our chaplain was only here. We had a chaplain, but he was just part-time. He was only here during the live race meet. And I got together with Elliot Walden, Bill Million, and Larry Melanson. We said, we need a full-time chaplain here. And so we went to the council for the chaplaincy and shared our burden with them. And they said, well, we're all in favor of that, but we don't have any money. We need some money. And so we went out with our hat in our hand, and God raised up some money. And so we brought on a chaplain full-time. Shortly, I brought Ken Boehm up from Florida, and shortly after he got here, we were meeting in the rec hall. If you guys have been on the backside of Churchill, you know where the rec hall is.
Yeah.
Well, we filled that thing up in a heartbeat, and so then we said we need a building that's specific for worship, and so we went to Churchill Downs and asked them about allocating some ground and helping us in that regard. They were very supportive. They allocated some ground. I think they rented it to us or leasing it to us for a penny a year or something, some nominal amount. They said, we'll allocate the ground, we'll help with some of the site preparation, but you have to build the building. And so then Elliot and myself and Bill and Larry and a number of others, we started soliciting individuals to raise the money. And the people in the horse racing industry are great people, and not just within the horse racing industry, but in the community at large. They were very generous and benevolent, raised up the money, and we built the chapel back there. When Churchill Downs gave us permission, they said, one condition, it's got to look like a church. And so there's a steeple at the top of Christ Chapel that's visible when you're in the grandstand on the front side. It doesn't stand out. You have to kind of look for it, but it's there, and we're honored that Churchill Downs would allocate that space to us and be so supportive of the ministry and the work that we're doing.
Yeah. Well, William and I are honored that you joined us tonight on our podcast, Pat, and very insightful, and you really opened up to us. We really appreciate it, and it's been a special night for us too. It really has.
Yep. Absolutely.
Well, it's an incredibly special time for me. I love the great sport of horse racing. I am what I am by the grace of God, but He's blessed me with talent and ability, and to be involved with the great sport of horse racing, and the opportunity to talk about that, share some old war stories, and walk down memory lane. It's been great fun, guys.
Pat, one more thing before we go, because this is something that I think maybe you can help with, and that's the people are commenting, and there's a young kid on here, and he wants to know, what was Pat Day like when he was doing the bull riding, and what made you decide to do the horse racing, and how could you motivate him to get it going?
Well, when I was trying to ride bulls, and before I got introduced to the great sport of horse racing, I was wild and crazy. I don't think you want to go down that path. And by divine orchestration, I believe God brought people into my life that had suggested I should be a jockey. Subsequently got me a job, as I said earlier on, on a thoroughbred farm, and it was kind of hit and miss until I really got up close and personal to the sport of horse racing, and then recognized that he had blessed me with tremendous talent. So, I would say this: do everything you do all that you do with all of your heart. Do it to the very best of your ability. Don't try to take shortcuts. Give it your all. You might have to try a number of different vocations before you find the one that fits. But God has a plan and a purpose. He's gifted us all with various gifts and talents and abilities, and there is a vocation out there that He has ready and waiting for you. It's just up to you to find it. Dear friend, a man named Max Lucado, a minister, has a church in San Antonio, Texas. And a great author. He writes a book, The Cure, C-U-R-E, The Cure for the Common Life. And in the book, he intimates, and he backs it up with scripture, that we all come prepackaged with certain gifts and talents and abilities. And there is a vocation out there that we can incorporate those gifts and talents and abilities. And it's not just a vocation where we can do that, but it is a vocation that we can be passionate about. And ultimately, he calls that living in the sweet spot. And so I would just encourage you to keep searching, seeking, trying until you find that spot. I might even encourage you to pick up the book and read it, because it'll certainly give you some insight on how you might do that.
Well, the sweet spot for us, Pat, was having you on the show. You were truly a legend and a great Hall of Famer.
Yeah, we appreciate you, Pat, and thank you for coming on.
Thank you guys for having me on. Happy Derby, whenever it is. Be safe, be secure. We'll get through this. This'll all go away, and we'll get back on track.
Right.
Sorry about your mother. Didn't know about her. I'm glad your wife's in recovery there, and Godspeed.
Thank you very much, man. God bless you all, and God bless your viewers. Appreciate you.
Thank you, Pat.
All right, that was Hall of Fame horse jockey Pat Day here tonight with us on the PrepSpin podcast. And man, that was just a great show. We got people all over America texting us and telling us that they tuned in tonight to watch it, and we appreciate it. Gary and I both do. And we'll see you guys on the next PrepSpin podcast. What a great night tonight. What a great night. Thanks, everybody.